The woman nodded. She wished him well and told him she hoped the rest of his day would go smoother before she and her friend got into the car. The cashier stepped outside too. She didn't speak loudly, she almost whispered. But she told the woman she appreciated how she handled the situation and that she hoped they would understand she didn't mean for things to go so far. The woman smiled softly and said she understood. Everyone has stressful days, she said. The important thing was learning from it, so it doesn't happen again. When she and her friend finally got inside the car, the tension had finally loosened. Her friend let out a long breath and leaned back in the seat. He said he couldn't believe how calm she stayed during everything. She laughed lightly and said she wasn't calm inside, but someone had to be. He nodded, still amazed. He said he had learned something from her too, as they drove off the station lot. The mood inside the car slowly shifted back to normal. The woman turned on the radio, something soft and peaceful, filling the silence. Her friend relaxed, looking out the window as the station faded from view. But even as they left, they both knew that what happened would stay in their minds for a long time, not because of the argument, but because of how it ended. Because the truth had come out not through shouting or threats, but through a simple request. Check your system. It was a reminder that sometimes the clearest truth is already there. All someone needs to do is look, as they drove toward the edge of town. The woman looked out at the road ahead. She didn't feel angry. If anything, she felt grateful the situation ended the right way. She hoped the people at the station would remember what happened, not to feel ashamed, but to grow. And in the quiet moments between songs on the radio, she realized something else too sometimes. Even in the middle of a tense moment, kindness can still guide everything back to peace. That thought stayed with her for a long time as the car continued down the wide open road. The road stretched out quietly in front of them as they left the gas station behind. The woman glanced once in the side mirror, watching the small building grow smaller until it blended into the distance. Her friend sat beside her, still looking thoughtful, still processing everything that had happened. The air inside the car felt calmer now, not heavy like before, just quiet in a tired sort of way. It was the kind of silence people fall into when they're both replaying events in their heads and trying to make sense of what they've learned. They didn't talk for a while. The radio played soft music, and the hum of the engine filled the gaps. It wasn't an uncomfortable silence. It was more like both of them needed a moment to settle down from the emotional weight of the day. Finally, her friend let out a long breath and rested his arm against the window. He said he couldn't believe how quickly things had changed back there. One moment it felt like everything was about to go wrong, and then with just one sentence, the whole situation flipped. The woman smiled a little, because she understood exactly what he meant. She told him the lesson she learned a long time ago. Sometimes the truth isn't loud. Sometimes it doesn't fight. Sometimes it just waits for the right moment. He nodded slowly, thinking about that. Then he said something that made her pause. He said he was proud of how she handled everything. Not just proud, grateful. If she had reacted differently, things might have gone in a much worse direction. She didn't answer at first. She wasn't used to hearing things like that, and she felt her chest warm with appreciation. Finally, she told him she only did what felt right, and that she was glad he was beside her even when things got messy. The car continued down the stretch of open road, the passing scenery slowly changing from shops to quieter homes and finally to long fields where the wind brushed through tall grass. The sunlight softened as the day moved toward evening, giving the sky a warm golden tint. A little while later, her friend suggested they stop somewhere to sit for a bit, maybe a quiet park or a small cafe. He said he felt like they needed something peaceful to balance out everything that had happened. The woman agreed, and she pulled into a small parking area beside, a local park she had visited before. They walked slowly toward a bench under a large tree. The breeze was gentle, carrying the soft smell of grass and the distant sound of children laughing near the playground. Everything felt calm, the complete opposite of the tension they had faced earlier. The contrast made the moment feel even more grounding. They sat down, letting the peaceful atmosphere wrap around them. Her friend leaned forward with his elbows on his knees, staring at the open field in front of them. He asked her if moments like these ever made her feel tired, not physically, but emotionally. She said yes, sometimes. Being calm in chaos takes energy. But she also said peace feels more meaningful after moments like that. He agreed. After a few minutes of quiet, he turned to her and asked what made her so sure that telling them to check their system would change anything. She explained she had seen similar situations before where assumptions caused the truth to get buried under frustration. She said she had learned that when people misunderstand you, sometimes the best answer is to direct them back to the facts instead of feeding the argument. He listened closely, nodding along. Then he said he learned something important, too, about listening, about patience, about not letting fear or anger speak louder than common sense. He admitted he had been scared back there, not because of anything dangerous, because he hated seeing her being treated unfairly. She gave him a gentle look and told him she understood. She felt the same way when people treated him unfairly. They sat there talking about everything, not just the incident, but the bigger picture. How sometimes people react to stress instead of truth. How misunderstandings can grow quickly. How simple mistakes can become storms if no one slows down long enough to check the facts. As the sun dipped lower, the world around them glowed with warm light. A few birds flew across the sky, and the air cooled just enough to feel refreshing. After some time, her friend leaned back on the bench and let out a soft laugh. He said that, in a strange way, the day had taught him something he wasn't expecting. How powerful calmness can be. She laughed too, admitting she didn't always feel calm on the inside. But she told him that staying calm is sometimes just choosing to breathe a little slower than the situation wants you to. He smiled at that, saying he wished he had that ability. She told him he did because even though he had looked tense during the argument, he didn't escalate things. He didn't shout. He didn't panic. He just tried to help. He seemed surprised, then nodded slowly, realizing she was right. Later, as they walked back to the car, the tension that had filled their bodies earlier was gone. They felt lighter. The events of the day were still fresh in their minds. But now they were wrapped in perspective instead of stress. Before getting in, her friend paused and looked at her seriously. He told her that what she did today mattered not just to the people at the gas station, but to him. He said watching her handle the situation with such steady confidence showed him how important truth and patience are. She felt a quiet sense of pride, not because she wanted recognition, but because she knew he meant every word. On the drive home, the conversation shifted to lighter topics. They talked about weekend plans, favorite meals, funny memories from recent weeks. It felt good to move back into ordinary life. But still, the day's lesson lingered beneath the surface. When they reached the edge of town, her friend mentioned he wanted to call his family later and tell them about what happened, not the drama, but the lesson. He said he wanted them to know that calmness can turn a storm to still water if someone is brave enough to stay centered. The woman smiled softly. She told him that sharing the lesson might help someone else in a difficult moment, and he agreed. The late afternoon sun hung low over the parking lot as the woman pulled her small car into the gas station. She was tired in the way that only a long day can make a person tired. The kind where your shoulders feel heavier than your bags and your head buzzes with thoughts you don't want to think anymore. All she wanted was to fill her tank, grab a bottle of water, and get home. The gas station wasn't even busy when she arrived. A couple of cars were parked near the pumps. A delivery truck rumbled on the far side. Inside, she could see only a few people standing in line. It looked peaceful enough, the kind of stop you imagine will take 2 or 3 minutes at most. She stepped out of her car, stretched her back for a second, and then walked inside. The cool air from the store's AC hit her face, calming her nerves for a moment. She grabbed a bottle of water from the cooler, carried it to the counter, and placed it gently on the counter. The cashier behind the counter didn't look up at first. He was tapping something into the register with stiff movements, as if everything he touched annoyed him. When he finally glanced up, his expression seemed to say he was already having a bad day. She didn't think much about it. People get tired. People get stressed. She wasn't one to judge. She smiled politely, trying to lighten the mood. "Just this and pump 4, please." The cashier didn't smile back. Instead, he keyed in the items with a dull expression. He read out the total, and she pulled out her card. Nothing unusual? No tension. No trouble. The card machine beeped once, then twice. Then showed the familiar message. Approved. She nodded, picked up her bottle of water, and turned slightly as if to head back to her car. But before she even took her second step, the cashier spoke. Your payment didn't go through. She froze, confused. Sorry. He tapped the counter with a dull thud. I said the payment didn't go through. You'll need to tap again. She blinked, looking down at her phone where the bank notification had already appeared. The charge was there clear as day. She turned her phone to show him. It actually did go through, she said gently. I got the message already. Didn't even glance at the screen. He shook his head, like he'd already decided she was wrong. Look, miss, I'm telling you, it didn't go through on my side. I know this system. It didn't register. You didn't pay. Her brows slightly pulled together, not in anger, but in confusion. I'm not saying the system didn't glitch, but the charge is here on my end. Maybe you can check again? He leaned back a little, his tone sharper. I don't need to check anything. The system didn't take it. Tap again. A small line had formed behind her, and she could already feel the eyes of other customers. Not in a hostile way, more in that curious way people watch when they sense something going off track. She stayed calm. I don't want to get charged twice. Can you check your register again, please? Maybe it's showing somewhere else. The cashier sighed dramatically, the kind of sigh that fills the space with annoyance before any words even come out. Ma'am, if you paid, it would show right here. It doesn't show. So you didn't pay? That word ma'am, the way he stretched it. It wasn't respectful. It was dismissive. Still, she didn't raise her voice. I understand. But can you just look again? Maybe it didn't refresh. Tapped the screen once, then twice, pretending to check. But it was clear he wasn't actually searching for anything. Nope, nothing. Pay again. The crowd behind her shifted. A woman crossed her arms. A man behind her clicked his tongue softly. Another person sighed, as if she were wasting their time. It's a simple fix, the cashier added, shrugging. Pay again, or step aside. She did step aside, but not out of guilt. She didn't want to block the line. She placed her bottle of water on a nearby counter and pulled up her banking app fully. The charge was there. The timestamp was clear. The store name was correct. It wasn't pending. It was posted. She walked back to the counter and tried again, gentle and steady. It went through. I'm not refusing to pay. I'm only asking you to double-check. Now the cashier's voice rose, just a bit loud enough for others to hear. Ma'am, if you don't want to pay, just say so. Don't play games with me. Several heads lifted at that. The woman's eyes widened, not in anger, but in disbelief. I'm not playing games. I'm showing you proof. He waved her phone away. Anyone can fake a screenshot. She breathed slowly, steadying herself. It's not a screenshot. It's my banking app. You can see the live balance. The cashier crossed his arms, unimpressed. Well, my system says you didn't pay. And the system doesn't lie, a few customers murmured. One whispered, this is getting ridiculous. Another said, just pay again so we can move. She didn't get offended. She understood how people can react when they're in a hurry. But she wasn't going to let herself be charged twice out of pressure. I'm not paying again for something that already went through, she said gently but firmly. The cashier leaned forward, pointing at her. Then you're not getting the fuel. It's that simple. She nodded slightly, her voice calm. Okay, so can we wait for your manager? He rolled his eyes. He's busy. I can wait, she said. The cashier muttered something under his breath and grabbed his phone. He dialed someone quickly. The conversation was short and sharp, and when he hung up, he looked even more irritated. He'll be here in a few minutes, he said. She thanked him softly, surprising him a little. Her politeness didn't match the irritation around her. For a moment, even he seemed unsure how to respond. But the moment passed quickly. Customers kept whispering. Some shot her sympathy. Others shook their heads. She stepped aside again, waiting calmly, holding her bottle of water loosely. The store felt heavier now, like the air had thickened, and everyone could feel the tension. A young man in line finally spoke up. "Don't worry," he told her quietly. "Systems glitch all the time. You're doing the right thing by not paying twice." She smiled gratefully. "Thank you." But the cashier overheard that and snapped, "The system didn't glitch. She's just refusing to pay." Her smile faded. Not because she was hurt, but because she realized something. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. It was turning into something much bigger, much faster than it needed to. She took a sip of her water, leaned back against a nearby shelf, and reminded herself to stay calm. She didn't know why the cashier was being this stubborn, but she wasn't going to lose her cool. Minutes passed slowly. The manager still hadn't arrived. The crowd inside the gas station had grown thicker. Cars kept pulling in outside. Some customers looked irritated, others curious. A man entering the store paused, sensing the tension. "Everything okay?" he asked casually. The cashier answered before she could speak. "She doesn't want to pay." She shook her head softly, correcting him. "I already paid. I'm just waiting for your manager." The man arched an eyebrow, noticing the notification still open on her phone. "Looks like you did." The cashier grumbled but said nothing. Her patience stayed steady. She didn't raise her voice, didn't argue loudly, didn't call anyone names. She simply waited, because she knew she was right, because she knew the system sometimes gets it wrong, because she knew the truth always comes out. And in that crowded gas station, with tension building moment by moment, she stood quietly calm, steady, certain. And that calmness was exactly what would make everything change later. In a way no one there expected. The minutes continued to pass slowly inside the store, and the woman could feel the atmosphere growing heavier with every breath. She didn't want to turn this into a scene, but the way the cashier kept repeating that she hadn't paid made it impossible for her to walk away. She stood there, calm and patient. Even though anyone else might have given up or snapped back, a few customers took their items and left quietly, but many stayed longer than they needed to. People naturally drift toward tension. They wanted to see what would happen. Some watched closely, whispering to each other, while others simply stood around pretending to browse shelves they weren't actually interested in. The woman kept checking her phone, refreshing the banking app every few seconds. Not because she doubted what she saw, but because she wanted to make sure nothing changed. She didn't want any reason for the cashier to claim she was lying or confusing something. But the charge stayed there, fixed and clear. At one point, a man who had been standing in the snack aisle came closer and spoke softly. "You handled that well," he told her. She gave a small nod. "Thank you. I'm just waiting for the manager. Hopefully, he can sort it out." He hesitated before speaking again. "You know, I've seen this machine glitch before. Happened to a friend of mine just last week." She appreciated the reassurance. "Yeah, it happens." The cashier overheard, and his tone became sharp again. "Nothing glitched. My system works fine. I already said that." The man shook his head at the cashier, but didn't bother arguing. Instead, he whispered to the woman, "Some people don't like being corrected. Don't take it personally." She smiled slightly, though her eyes betrayed the exhaustion settling deeper. Another minute passed. Then another. It felt like forever. Finally, the door opened with a slow metallic ring of the entrance bell, and the manager stepped inside. He looked older, calm, and serious, the kind of person who moved quietly but carried authority just by the way he walked. His eyes scanned the store even before he reached the counter. The cashier wasted no time. "She's refusing to pay," he said loudly, pointing at her as if he had been waiting for this exact moment. A few customers sighed. One shook his head. Another muttered, "Here we go again." The woman stepped forward calmly. "I did pay," she said slowly, so no one could misunderstand her. "The amount went through. I already showed the notification. I just need someone to check the system properly." The manager raised a hand gently, signaling both of them to pause. "Let me see." She handed him her phone, showing the live banking app. He leaned in, reading the date, time, amount, and reference number. Then he turned to the cashier. "Did you really check the system?" The cashier nodded aggressively. "Yes." I told you already. It didn't show up. Not my fault she's trying to get out of paying. The woman didn't react. She had learned long ago that sometimes the best way to deal with someone who accuses you unfairly is simply not to absorb their words. The manager moved behind the counter and tapped on the screen. His fingers glided over the keys more thoughtfully than the cashier's had. He checked one tab, then another. Then another. He frowned. "It's not here," he said quietly. "But," and that but made everyone go silent. He typed again. A new window opened. He scrolled through another section, one the cashier clearly hadn't checked. There it was, the missing. Payment, posted, approved, registered. Exactly. Where the system places payments whenever there's a slight delay in syncing with the main screen. The manager exhaled softly, then looked at the cashier not angrily, but with clear disappointment. "It's right here," he said, tapping the screen. The cashier froze. His face stiffened. That screen hardly ever updates without refreshing," he muttered. The manager looked at him calmly. "You didn't refresh." Few customers sighed, relieved. Some nodded to the woman, as if to say finally. Others rolled their eyes at the cashier, but she didn't celebrate. She didn't smirk or gloat. She simply waited for the manager to finish. He turned back to her. "Your payment is here. Everything's good. I'm sorry you had to wait." She nodded politely. "Thank you for checking." The tension in the air eased just slightly. A few people began walking away. Conversations resumed in low tones, but the situation wasn't over, not yet. The cashier, clearly embarrassed, leaned forward again. "Well, she still confused the system. That shouldn't happen. I knew it wasn't my fault. There it was again, that need to avoid responsibility." The woman didn't engage. She simply picked up her bottle of water and prepared to leave. But right as she stepped toward the door, a sudden loud beeping echoed from the pumps outside. The manager looked up. "Which pump did you use?" "4, she said. He frowned again and stepped toward the window. "Pump 4 is locked." The cashier shrugged, almost proud. "Yeah, because she didn't pay." "No," the manager corrected him. "It's locked because the pump timed out while you refused to release it." The cashier straightened, defensive. "I was waiting for her to pay again." The manager shook his head with clear disapproval. He stepped to the door and motioned for her to follow him outside. The crowd inside shifted again. A few people moved closer to the windows to watch. Some stepped outside too, pretending to head to their cars, but clearly curious. She followed the manager to pump 4. He checked the screen on the pump, then keyed in a reset. It beeped again, then went quiet. "You should be able to fuel now," he said. She nodded softly. "Thank you." But just as she reached toward the pump handle, another car pulled up behind hers. A large SUV engine rumbling loudly. The driver leaned out of the window and shouted, "Hey! You done yet? Some of us need to get home." The woman stepped back slightly. She didn't want trouble with another customer. The manager raised a calming hand. "She's fueling now. It'll just take a moment." But the man in the SUV didn't calm down. He looked irritated, even impatient. "I've been waiting already." "What's taking so long?" The manager explained. "There was a system glitch. It's being sorted." Instead of understanding, the driver scoffed loudly. "Great. People causing delays for no reason." The woman felt the sting of that, not because the words were harsh, but because she had done nothing wrong. Yet she was being treated like she was the problem. The manager stepped closer to the SUV. "Sir, please, just give her a moment." The man grumbled but didn't move. She lifted the pump handle, placed it into her tank, and began fueling. The sound of gasoline flowing through the nozzle was steady and loud in the tense air. But even as she fueled, she could feel eyes on her customers watching, the impatient driver glaring, the embarrassed cashier standing just inside the store with crossed arms. The moment felt stretched, uncomfortable, heavier than it should have been, and then something surprising happened. Another customer. An older woman who had witnessed everything stepped forward. She wasn't loud, but her voice carried kindness. You handled all of this with more patience than most people could, she told her. The woman felt her throat tighten slightly. Thank you. Don't let that man bother you, the older woman added, gesturing toward the SUV with her chin. Some people talk before they think. Faint smile touched her lips. I know. The tank clicked full. She gently returned the pump to its holder. But just as she moved to close her gas cap, the manager approached her again. His expression serious. There's something else, he said quietly. She looked up at him, puzzled. Something wrong? He lowered his voice. The system still isn't fully updating. I need to run a manual check inside to make sure everything is processed correctly. Could you wait just a minute before you drive off? She nodded, still calm. Of course, I understand. The manager walked back toward the store. The woman stood beside her car, waiting patiently but unaware that the situation was about to shift again, because inside that store, the cashier was about to create a new problem. One that would turn everything into a standoff, and all of it because he still wouldn't accept the truth, a truth she would soon make impossible for him to deny, with just 4 simple words. Check your system. The woman waited beside her car. Watching the manager disappear back into the store, she had no idea what exactly he needed to check, but after everything that had already happened, she understood that this situation wasn't going to end quietly. The air around her felt tight, as if the tension from inside the store had followed her all the way out to the pump. The man in the SUV behind her still looked annoyed. His fingers tapped impatiently on his steering wheel. And every few seconds, he muttered something too low for her to hear clearly. But she wasn't going to let his irritation pull her into an argument. She kept her focus steady, taking slow breaths. Reminding herself that losing her calm wouldn't help anybody, she took a sip of her water and leaned slightly against her car. The older woman who had spoken to her inside earlier had now come outside too and stood a few steps away. She offered a warm, reassuring smile. You handled yourself well in there, the older woman said gently. The woman returned a small smile. Thank you. I'm just waiting for him to check whatever he needs to check. It'll work out, the older woman replied. It always does, eventually. The woman appreciated that simple comfort more than she expected. After another moment, the older woman walked toward her own car. She waved briefly before pulling out of the lot. The woman watched her go, feeling a small sense of comfort fade with her. Inside the store, the manager reached the counter. He began typing again, moving slowly and carefully through the screens of the system. But the cashier stood nearby with crossed arms and a thin, irritated expression. You're wasting time, the cashier muttered. The manager didn't look at him. This isn't wasting time. It's making sure things are done right. Cashier snorted. You always take customer sides. I know what I saw. The system didn't show any payment. And yet it was there, the manager replied calmly. The cashier didn't answer. His jaw tightened. He tapped his fingers rapidly against the counter, a sign that he was growing more and more irritated. Outside, the woman checked her phone again. The charge was still there. Everything looked correct. She wasn't worried about her payment. What she didn't know was what the manager had meant when he said the system still wasn't fully updating. She wondered if one more glitch might make the cashier accuse her again. She sighed quietly. She hoped not, but trouble wasn't finished yet. The door of the store swung open, and out came a young man wearing a hoodie and holding a drink. He slowed when he reached her car and looked at her curiously. You're still here? He asked. Just waiting, she replied. He's still giving you issues? The young man asked with a sympathetic expression. Not him. The manager just needs to verify something. Ah. The young man nodded knowingly. Well, good luck. That guy at the counter is always like that. You're not the first person to deal with him. She didn't want to respond negatively, so she only nodded politely. The SUV driver behind her leaned out his window again. How long is this going to take? Some of us have places to be. The woman took a slow breath before speaking. The manager asked me to wait a moment. He'll be right out. Great, so now we're all waiting because of some system problem? He replied sharply. She didn't say anything back. She wasn't going to argue with someone who clearly had no interest in understanding. Inside, the manager kept clicking through tabs and his frown deepened. "There's a duplicate entry," he murmured. The cashier perked up. "See, I told you." She messed up the system. Probably tapped wrong or something. "That's not what this means," the manager corrected him calmly. "It means the system delayed syncing and registered the same transaction twice internally. It happens. It must be cleared manually." The cashier rolled his eyes. "Whatever. Still not my fault." "You're right," the manager said. "It's not your fault, but arguing with customers isn't how we fix it." The cashier stiffened but didn't respond. The manager stepped away from the counter and headed toward the door outside. The woman watched him approach. He walked slowly, as if thinking through something important. "Everything all right?" she asked gently. "For the most part," the manager said. "But before I clear the duplicate entry, I need to confirm something with you." "Sure," she replied. He held up a small notepad he had brought with him. "Did you tap your card only once?" "Yes," she answered confidently. "Only once." It approved immediately. The manager nodded. "That's what I expected. The system logged it twice internally on our end, which is why it still looks strange to the cashier. I'm going to clear the duplicate and finalize everything." "Okay," she said calmly. But just then the SUV driver behind her groaned loudly. "Oh, come on. This is ridiculous. Why are we all stuck because of this?" The manager turned to him, no irritation in his voice, just steady professionalism. "Sir, you're welcome to move to another pump if you're in a hurry." I shouldn't have to." The driver shot back. "Then please be patient," the manager said. The driver didn't reply. He just shook his head and sank back into his seat. The manager returned inside the store, leaving the woman by her car once again. She pulled her jacket around herself a bit tighter. Despite the warm air, she felt a chill not from the weather, but from the tension and exhaustion settling into her bones. The young man in the hoodie from earlier was now standing near his bike, watching her again from a distance. He gave her a small nod. She returned one. People weren't all the same. Some were kind, some were impatient, some were simply trying their best. Inside the store, the manager cleared the duplicate entry and updated the system one final time. He printed out a copy of the transaction from their end. He then walked back toward the door, but before he walked out, the cashier said under his breath, "She caused all this drama for no reason." The manager stopped and turned slowly. "No, the system caused it. And how you handled it made it worse." The cashier opened his mouth as if to argue, but the manager held up a hand, not angry, but firm. "That woman stayed polite the entire time." "You didn't." The cashier looked away. Outside, the manager handed the woman the printed sheet. "Here," he said. "This is a record of the payment from our end. Everything is correct now." She thanked him. She didn't need the paper, but she appreciated the reassurance. She started walking toward her driver's door. She wanted nothing more than to finally go home. But the moment she reached for the door handle, something unexpected happened. A loud beep came from inside the store. Then another. Then a third, sharper. Longer. The manager turned quickly. "What now?" he murmured. The woman felt her stomach drop slightly. Had something else gone wrong? Customers inside started murmuring. A couple of them moved aside. Someone pointed toward the counter. The cashier stood frozen, staring at the screen. Then, without warning, he shouted, "Hey, get back in here." The woman froze. The manager rushed past her into the store. The customers stepped back. The cashier pointed at the screen again, his voice shaky. She didn't pay. He yelled, "Look." The system reversed it. The payment disappeared. Gasps filled the small store. The woman felt her heartbeat quickened and in fear, but in disbelief. She had the charge on her phone. She had the receipt. She had done everything right. The manager leaned over the counter and stared at the screen. He frowned, then frowned deeper. The cashier crossed his arms triumphantly. "See? I told you." The woman stepped inside, slowly and calmly. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't rush. She walked right up to the counter, placed her phone down, and spoke softly but clearly, "Check your system." The customers went silent. The cashier stiffened. The manager squinted at the screen because the truth was about to come out, and this time, the cashier wouldn't be able to talk his way around it. The afternoon sun had shifted by the time. Everything at the station finally calmed down. What had started as a simple stop for fuel had turned into something none of the people present would forget anytime soon. After the standoff ended with that single line, "Check your system," the tension slowly drained out of the air, like air escaping a balloon. Yet the emotions left behind didn't disappear as easily. People were still whispering, still glancing around, still trying to understand how things had escalated the way they had. The woman who had been at the center of everything stood quietly near her car. She wasn't celebrating anything or rubbing anything in. She just looked relieved that the truth had finally come out. But even so, she kept checking on her friend, who stood beside her rubbing his hands together as if trying to shake off the stress. He had meant well the entire time, but the experience had left him rattled. He kept taking slow breaths, trying to calm his nerves. The store manager, however, looked embarrassed. He kept pacing inside the front door of the store, pretending to straighten items that didn't need straightening. Every few seconds, he glanced toward the woman and her friend, then looked away quickly, almost like he wasn't sure whether he should apologize or just stay quiet. Everyone in the store had seen the mistake, and even though no one was openly laughing at him, the weight of the moment seemed to sit heavily on his shoulders. Meanwhile, the cashier, who had been arguing with her earlier, stayed behind the counter, staring at the computer screen. Now she looked less angry and more confused, like she was replaying everything in her head and realizing she had reacted too fast and too harshly. She didn't speak, but her face showed that she was starting to understand how wrong things had gone. Outside, a few customers slowly returned to their normal routines. Some wiped their car windows. Some leaned against their vehicles, scrolling through their phones. But still, every few moments, someone would glance over at the woman like they expected something else to happen. It wasn't fear, they just wanted to see what she was going to do next. But instead of reacting loudly or storming off, the woman simply walked toward the store entrance. Her steps were calm, steady, peaceful, as if she was ready to let the moment pass, but also ready to close it properly. When she reached the door, she gently pushed it open and stepped inside. Everyone inside looked up. The manager stood frozen, his hands still resting on a row of snack bags he had pretended to rearrange. The cashier straightened up, as if bracing herself. But the woman didn't raise her voice. She didn't accuse. She didn't point fingers. Her tone was steady, quiet, and clear. She said she understood mistakes happen and that she wasn't angry. What had upset her was the way she and her friend had been treated when they tried repeatedly to explain themselves. The way their words had been dismissed. The way the situation escalated before anyone bothered to check anything. Her voice wasn't cold. It was warm, but firm. And because she didn't speak like someone trying to win an argument, but someone trying to teach a lesson without shaming anyone, people listened. The manager swallowed hard and nodded. He apologized. Not dramatically, not with excuses, just a simple, honest apology for not listening when he should have. The cashier hesitated before apologizing as well. She didn't look confident saying it, but the apology was real. She admitted she had let frustration take over and reacted too quickly. She didn't try to make herself look innocent. She didn't try to shift blame. For the first time since the argument started, her voice was soft. The woman accepted both apologies graciously. She didn't drag the moment out. She didn't belittle them. She made it clear the only thing she hoped was that next time, someone else in her situation would be treated with a little more patience. People inside the store let out quiet breaths, as if a huge cloud that had been hanging over all of them finally started to lift outside. Her friend stood by the car, still trying to shake off everything. When she returned to him, she smiled gently and told him it was done. He nodded, though he still looked a bit shaken. He had been trying to help, and the whole situation had made him feel powerless. But hearing that things had ended calmly helped him breathe a little easier as they prepared to leave. A few people approached them, not too close, just enough to speak. They thanked the woman for staying calm, for not letting the moment turn into something worse. One older man said he had learned something from simply watching her handle things. Another woman said she admired how she kept her voice steady even when things were heated. The woman didn't take credit. She said, "Sometimes staying calm is the only way to keep a situation from turning into something ugly." She said she wasn't perfect, but she tried. After a moment, the manager stepped outside as well. He looked nervous again, but he walked up to them with sincerity. He explained that things at the station had been stressful lately, that they were understaffed. Their systems had glitch issues often, but he admitted none of that excused the way he handled things. He promised to speak to his employees about being more careful before accusing customers of anything. As evening took over, the streetlights flickered on, glowing softly against the fading sky. When she pulled up in front of his home, they sat for a moment before saying goodbye. He thanked her again, not for what she had done at the gas station, but for everything she had taught him simply by being herself. She told him she was grateful too. Grateful he stood beside her. Grateful he believed her even when others didn't. Grateful he tried so hard to keep things from getting worse. After he got out of the car and waved goodbye, she drove off slowly, feeling peaceful. The day had been heavy, but the ending felt meaningful. It reminded her that even difficult moments can leave behind something good. On her way home, she thought about the people at the gas station, the manager, the cashier, the customers, who watched everything unfold. She hoped they remembered the moment, not with embarrassment, but with understanding. She hoped next time it would be slower to assume and quicker to check the truth. When she finally reached her house, she turned off the engine and sat for a moment in the quiet darkness. She took a deep breath, letting herself feel the relief of being home. The porch light cast a warm glow across the front yard. Before going inside, she looked up at the sky, now dark with only a few stars, visible, and whispered something to herself. She said today was tough, but it was worth it, because the truth came out, because patience won, because calmness protected everyone from a situation that could have turned much worse. And most of all, because she chose to believe in herself, even when others doubted her. As she stepped inside her home and closed the door behind her, she knew one thing for certain: the simple words she spoke, "Check your system," had changed more than just a misunderstanding. They had reminded everyone, including herself, that clarity often comes from looking carefully, not reacting quickly. And sometimes, the strongest thing a person can do is stay steady in the face of chaos. That was the real ending of the story, a quiet, powerful reminder she would carry with her long after the day was over.